The following is a conversation with Shore, a climber, a coach, a routesetter, and also a musician. He is also the president of Braga's climbing club, also known as Clube de Escalada de Braga. As someone who only recently discovered and started indoor bouldering, it was exciting to talk and learn from his experience. Climbing as a sport has a long tradition, but only recently it has become mainstream, as illustrated by its first appearance in the Olympics this year. This creates the opportunity for the sport to discover novel paths forward, and I find it exciting to be witnessing this era of discovery and experimentation. It was also very interesting for me to discuss with him some of which these paths might be and to reflect together on the deeper meaning of the sport. As always, I provide the timestamps for the conversation, and now here it is. Good, let's go. Hello, Filipe.
Hello.
Or as your friends call you, Shore.
Yeah, it's mainly sure. Nobody calls me Philip.
Yeah, I think this is the first time I see you away from a climbing wall, so it's a bit out of context. I'm a bit surprised.
Yeah, it may be true. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like I'm watching a species outside its habitat, like a fish, like whatever.
Well, yeah. We kind of met in very specific realities, so I think it makes sense for you. But
Yeah,
I'm actually used to being in different kind of stages, so it's okay.
I think that's one interesting thing about people is that we all exist in multiple dimensions,
Yeah.
and we know we know that we are different people. We have different groups, we have different likings, and we interact in all these planes. But usually, when we meet someone, they only know us from one perspective.
Yeah,
So
true.
for us, we exist in their perspective. And in your case, I know you're very diversified, musician, climber.
Yeah, I've done a lot of things in my life, so it will be, maybe we'll go there. It will be interesting. But yeah, it's funny when people just know like a side of you, a very small side of you. So it can be interesting. Let's see.
Do you feel you're very mysterious in that sense?
No, I think, I mean, I tend to be a shy person, especially that was a side of my personality I always struggle with. I was really, really shy. That was something that it really bothered me. So I did my best, especially during the teenage time, to kind of fight it, to overcome it. And I think nowadays when people know me and they won't tell that I'm a shy person because I worked really hard on it. But that's the truth. And I've been playing with bands, I've been giving interviews for quite a long time, so I have my tools to kind of camouflage it, but yeah. So I will say, but I'm not mysterious. I may be shy sometimes.
I would never say you're shy. You don't
Yeah.
come across as a shy guy because you're firstly due to your activities, like you're a musician, so musician involves putting yourself in front of people.
Yeah,
If you want
I
to be
did it on purpose because I wanted to be in situations that were where I need to overcome my issue. So I always tried. I may have many defects, like everybody, I think, but that was probably the defect that I hated the most on me. So that was the one where I worked the most. And so I push myself all the time to be in situations where I need to deal with it. So, and I think that's why when you meet me today, it doesn't show so much. And also, like you said, you know me on my environment, so I'm kind of in control of all the situations. So I'm in a comfortable position. It's totally different. For instance, when you are giving an interview and you have no idea what we'll be talking about and stuff, then there are new elements that you're not controlling, so
I think
gonna get more protective about it.
I think that what you did is the way to go when we have a difficulty in ourselves, in our mind, is just not running away and facing it head on. I think that's quite brave, and that's the approach.
Well, like I said, maybe I have more defects that I'm kind of comfortable, let's say, with it, that we tend to accept. But what I hated the most, especially when I was a teenager and I was really debating with the issue, was that I was not saying something or I was not doing something because I was too shy at the moment. And that was something when I was thinking about it later that I was not able to forgive to myself. And that's why I work so much on it. Yeah.
I see. Is that the kind of thing that was going through your mind, like when we talk to a girl when we're young, and then we go home and say, "Oh man, I should have said this."
Yeah,
This is
also
that kind of things.
I mean, not only, but also, yeah.
I see.
I mean, when you're a teenager, there is a lot of focus on the girls for sure. So, but yeah, there was a part, but that wasn't mostly about the girls. You know, there's not like only that. Like you have in. I kind of wanted to have my life on control, which took several years because now I kind of create my job, I do where I work, but for many years it wasn't like that. And in order to do that, you need to be able to step up, you know, and to go and meet people and talk to them and explain the ideas and sell your ideas. And for that, being shy, it's a huge issue. So that's something I need to work with.
I said girls as an example because I felt the same when I was growing up. I was entering university and I was really shy, the kind of not geek but not the extrovert kind of guy. And I had some cousins or some friends that were very friendly, very extrovert, and I always admired them because I was thinking, how can you be like this? Or actually, how can I be like you? And very, very often I would have some encounters, some social encounter with girls or friends, and I would be thinking, what should I have said? What could be different? Because I knew I was subpar.
Yeah, but even that, it's a little bit like when we are climbing. If you have to do that management all the time, it doesn't come natural yet. You get tired from it, you know, and it's not totally spontaneous. And I wanted to get to that point where I don't need to be managing. Okay, so how do I need to react now? What do I need to say? You know, so yeah, that's why I push myself to the limit and to try to be as much uncomfortable on this shy part as possible. So you learn to be natural and you're never 100% natural, especially when you are on stage or working or, you know, we need to keep some pose, let's say, but yeah, to ride as natural as possible. That's the goal.
Yeah.
About the climbing, because I always have this example. It's the same. You want to be climbing as natural as possible and don't need to be processing every part of what you're doing all the time. Like, am I stepping in the right way? Am I holding it the right way? You just aim to go with the flow and just get to the point as easy and as natural as possible. That's what I think, all aim. And here in the society is kind of the same. So it's not like...
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, the conversation will naturally shift to climbing. So let's go there. We were discussing before we started recording some of the terminology that was being used. And I had some questions. Specifically, we were talking between translations between Portuguese to English.
Yeah.
But maybe it could be interesting to speak about the English terms themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I was making you some questions about how should we say something in Portuguese, vias, that in English could be translated either to route or to boulders.
Kind of, yeah. Vias in Portuguese will translate to English as routes. When we're talking about routes, we have the concept that a route that you will climb is something really high. So when you're doing bouldering, indoors, there is a a rule that you can never overcome the 4.5 meters. So under 4.5 meters, it's a boulder. Normally, higher than that, it will start to be a route, because you will need to use a rope instead of a crash pad or a mattress for it. So a via, it's specifically something that you will climb with a rope, and it will be higher. So it enters the sport climb or the traditional climb. The other part that we kind of use normally, even the English word, which is bloco, it will translate to boulder, although boulder has different meanings even for climbing. When you translate it to Portuguese, it can mean different things depending on the context, but yeah. So if it's something higher, and what we normally use here, it's a boulder or a problem.
And the boulder in this case can be both indoor and outdoor.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned that the boulder was sometimes called problems.
Exactly, because the word in English boulder comes from like a big rock. And when you're setting, especially in the new philosophy, let's say, sometimes well, not sometimes, most of the time actually, it's not something of I want to create a line to go high, but more of a complex puzzle, let's say. And it can be even a side-to-side puzzle. It doesn't even need to go vertical. So we kind of use this concept of problems, puzzles. It doesn't need to be a boulder all the time, although that's what comes from the original sport that started outside, and most of the time we still use the boulder word for it.
Well, by trade, I am a researcher, so I'm a bit picky about terminology, because in my field there's a lot of terminology going over the place. But you using the word problem struck me highly, because I've always seen climbing as a problem-solving sport.
It is.
So isn't abstract a route also a form of problem solving?
Well, when you're climbing, you need to be making decisions all the time. So you need to be solving problems for sure. But if you put it in that way, I mean, you're solving problems pretty much in every sport. When you talk problems in the boulder, normally when you're creating that, we, as a routesetter, we are aiming for something a little bit more complex. Probably something that you may need to try a couple of times to figure out what may work, what may not work, and that is independent of you will be able to do it or not, because then it's related to your climbing level, let's say. But the aim when you're setting a problem, it's more of that puzzle part, that even if you are not able, you need to struggle in finding what may and not work to solve that. Of course, when you're climbing on a route, on a high line, there are some choices, and sometimes we even say that there are problems or boulders in some section. When we refer to that as the more complex part, something that it's not so clear, it's not so obvious, and how's the best way to overcome it. So that's why we use this more specific part of
problem
words.
solving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lost the translation there, sorry.
No problem. You also said an interesting word that was in quotes, when I'm setting a problem or when I'm setting a route. And one big aspect of you is that you're a great route setter. We've have experience climbing in your gym. It is amazing usually, and that's also reinforced by the learnings that we have when we go somewhere else, or like we did this week. We went to Porto. Porto had a great gym, as well, great
Yeah.
problems, great routes. And something that usually comes across is that people comment in a positive way your route setting.
Hmm.
And I think it's great. Like this week, also, you made a very original one. You put a tire in a
Yeah, yeah,
swing. It
yeah.
was so fun. It was so creative. I had never even occurred that a swing could be part of a boulder as a tire. It was great.
Well, I mean, I've been an artist, let's say. I don't like to talk about myself as an artist, but I can say that I always consider myself a creative person. But I've been in arts and music for a long time, and I see some parallels in both in stuff that I do, because you need to be creative. But when you are creative, most of the time you're also recycling your experience and what you saw, and so for you the tire can be new, but probably I've seen maybe not the tire but some elements that it's not fixed, it's moving in a way, and I decided to adapt, and I have many more ideas. The concept of using moving holds in climbing, it's not new. Yeah, and I just saw it in the garage. Sometimes like, I'm going to take this, and someday I'm going to do something different with them and let the kids play and let everybody older feel like kids also and playing. So
It's a great idea, but creativity is not entirely from 0 to 1. It's about taking something that already exists, adapting it slightly, and creating something different.
yeah,
Because we are all inspired by something in some way.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. It's the same with music, because it's almost impossible nowadays to come across with something totally new that nobody ever heard. So you're always like remaking something, so yeah, it's the same. And for you, you can hear like a song and say, okay, this is very original, but probably for the artist, they know from where the inspiration comes from and what was the process to get there. So
Of course, but that happens in every art.
yeah,
Anyway,
so that's what I would say.
I don't think you should bother much about that.
No,
That's
I'm
natural.
not worried about it. It's just like you said, for you, it's very original, and somebody may be watching us later and say, no, I've seen that somewhere or something. So yeah, that's
Anyway.
the point.
Anyway, you are a very accomplished route setter at the national level, at least. I was wondering, and I wanted to ask you this: when you are setting a route, what goes through your mind? What do you try to capture?
I I think I'm still trying to find myself as a route setter, and for that I mean like trying to understand. It's the same like in the music. Try to understand what makes us unique, or what puts us apart from the rest. Like you said, we went to other gym this week, and there were some comments after, like, oh, I like this better, and on the other side. And this is the kind of things that for me are really important, because I want to understand what adds value to the experience of each person. And if you come to the gym and you think you are having a good experience there, I try to understand what is making the difference for you, like what translates for the user of a good route setting and a bad route setting, why people prefer this kind of problem. So I'm still trying to understand the differences, but mostly I try to set movement. I try to create that, because that's what I'm more passionate about when I'm climbing. I'm not so attracted by like really powerful and really strong moves. Like, you need to be an amazing athlete to overcome it, but more of you need to understand how to move your body to get there. And that's sort of the part where I like more. And it's also easier to create the puzzles.
So the technique, basically, like how you position your body, how you shift your weight.
Yeah, like how to lock yourself to be able to move this hand, or a coordination move to get to the other part instead of always being very static and following the logic on one hand over the other, all the time. So yeah, for instance, in the other gym, I felt the route setting, it's more in the traditional line, everything is more kind of a sequence that it's easier at least to understand when you are in the base. Of course, there is like really hard problems and I really struggle. It's not connected to that, but I try to set something that even if you need to climb with normal shoes, you will have fun.
Right. Is this related somehow to the creativity aspect you were saying?
Yeah, I think so.
One thing or one episode that I remember that happened, we were in SEP, in your gym, and some girl was climbing some route, and at the end, right before she reached the top, she fell. And I remember that you commented, I don't know if you remember, but you said something. The fact that she fell was bad on my route setting. It was my fault that she fell, because after she reached that point, she should not have fallen. Okay. It was a white boulder.
I have no idea about the...
But do you understand, do you remember the kind of meaning that you try to convey with that sentence?
Well, I don't recall the example, but when you set... as a route setter, you also create expectations, like a very common expectation for route setters is the betas. The beta is the solution for that people will need to find to get to the top. So most route setters tend to get a little bit disappointed when the beta that they intended to is not the beta used. Maybe somebody found an easier solution, let's say. And that on the industry you call beta breakers. So that's an example of you creating an expectation. I want to create like a dyno move, let's say, where you need to be really dynamic, and then somebody comes across and does it really static and still manage. That's a failure for my route setting, for my perspective, because that was not my goal. It can still be a great problem, but for me that's bad route setting, because I'm failing to promote the moves that I wanted. And probably from the example you're saying, I think what happened was that I wanted the crux, which is the hardest section, to be below the problem and not the top of the problem. So that's probably what failed. I was expecting that if everybody does this move, then they will be able to get to the top. And maybe she didn't, because I don't recall. Maybe she was not tall enough, or I have not anticipate the move she is going to do, and the move just came wrong. So that's bad route setting. That's a failure.
But when an athlete does not perform the beta that you expect as a route setter, is it really a failure on your route setting? No. Or is it a strength of the athlete also?
No, it depends. I mean, and it's actually an interesting point, because we set in a non-commercial way, because when you set in a commercial way, you just want people to come in and do as many problems on the grade that they are comfortable or they want to climb as much as possible. We have a total different concept, because we're trying to make people progress as better and as faster as possible. So we have a route setting philosophy, let's say, of teaching, promoting new movements, promoting learning, promoting experiencing different stuff. That's also where the tire comes from. Because there are new elements that you need to learn how to deal with. And so you can set a really good problem, like you did your job, let's say, perfect. and still these athletes won't be able to climb it, or you can set a really bad problem and people are really happy because they get to the top and they made it, so the ego part is really happy, and still he did a lousy job. So it's not really connected. Actually most of the time I do some mind games, let's say, where I put the section that I want to train, like let's say like in the beginning, and then I put a really hard part on top that is not interesting for me to promote, but you'll keep people resetting because they will fail on top, so they need to restart and do the section that I want them to learn over and over and over again. It's like putting the carrot in front of them, but I want you to train this.
I don't know if you should say this, because now people will rage against you. Like you're treating
it's
us
the
like
ego, we just play with the ego of the people to teach them. So it will always work, even if you know it. It doesn't matter.
And now I regret when sometimes if I fail on the top part, we usually shit and we start in the middle. And we go on. So
that's normally something that really pisses me off, and also I think that's not a very good philosophy as an athlete.
Isn't it in a way effort management? Because if you know you nail the bottom part and you really struggle on the top,
it can be a tool, and it can also be a runaway pass. It depends. So we cannot generalize that, but normally a boulder, it's actually in a sequence of very few movements normally. So we're not talking about routes like really high and long lines. So the idea, the concept is that you do all the sequence without stopping, this very short, powerful and puzzling sequence. If I'm just talking about training now. If you're skipping it, you're getting the wrong idea, because most of the times you're not starting the movement the same way as if you were doing it from it's like you can put already yourself in the comfortable position, and also you're not dealing with getting tired there and being pumped and your heartbeat being too fast, all these issues that you need to manage when you're doing it from start. Of course that there is no point of doing it 100 times straight and keep failing in the same time, because maybe you're not doing the right technique and you need to practice that, or you need to understand it. So for that kind of strategy, we call isolate. You're isolating the move, and that's a tool. But that's a tool that should only be used when it's the right time, and not like a pattern. Like it's what I do. Oh, I felt here, I will restart here. That's a really bad philosophy for me, I think, as an athlete.
As an athlete and as a beginner athlete, my experience in using that tool is when I need to embed in my muscles the muscle memory of a certain movement. As you said in the beginning.
If you're starting, it's more common to use it because there are technique issues that need to be addressed. So if you are learning a new move, it's normal that you need to practice just that move. And if you'll get there and you are tired, you won't be able to learn that move probably perfectly. So, it makes more sense when you are starting to just practice the moves and practice the moves and practice the moves until you perfect it. And then you can start using this move. It's a tool, and you can start using it to break the puzzles that we form for you. So definitely you should be using it more when you're starting, and less and less and less when you are progressing in your climbing career, let's say.
Exactly, because as we mentioned in the beginning, you cannot allow yourself to be thinking about everything when you're climbing, because that's just too much information. You just need to climb naturally.
Yeah.
And at least I've been feeling that for me, one part of becoming natural and not really thinking about everything is just making sure that I know to myself, I can do this, I know where to put my hands, how to put the hands, so I just practice that isolation.
I was going to say that also there is this ego part where sometimes, and going back to the other route setting, where sometimes people, they kind of close the problem once they top it, you know? And yeah, because the ego is there, like, oh, I've done it. But that's also a really bad way of training, because when you top a problem, most of the times you're still really far away from the optimal solution.
You struggle, you shake.
Yeah, you know, it's so your ego is really happy because, oh, I've done it and this was really hard. But it's kind of rare to find this athlete that said, no, I need to make this easier, or I need to climb this effortless. So I need to keep working on this. But then the ego is not motivated anymore, you know, it's just like, oh, then it just becomes a work, and it's different. Also, I need to manage all this stuff on our club, because we have lots of people with different motivations. You have people that they just come because they want to do something healthy, or they just want to have 2 hours without not thinking about the rest of their professional or emotional life, whatever. And then you have these people that want to go and do competition and have their competition goals and stuff. And we need to have all this mixture in a very small gym and have them all motivated and keep them coming. So it's also a struggle to balance all.
Yeah, for sure. But I suffer a bit from that ego, especially because I climb with someone else, a friend of mine, and he's a bit better than me, to be modest. And he's usually ahead of me, so he's always pushing me. So when he does something, he almost always does it before I do. So he does it, he's moving on to something else, and I don't want to fall behind. So I feel I need to keep trailing behind him.
Well, having somebody that you can compare to and that is pushing you forward, it's kind of a very good way of improving. We also try to promote this as much as possible, especially with the kids, because I mean, we don't want to be pointing out like, oh, this is better than you need to get to that level. That it's totally not what we want to do. But we know that, again, the mind games come on board. For instance, if I have an athlete that is struggling with jumping, let's say, and I know that they compare each other, I will set a jump that the other guy can easily do.
That's evil.
Well, so then I know this person will be motivated to also do the jump. Otherwise, they will just say, "Oh, I don't know how to jump," and they will do something else. You know, so that's a way of pushing people. Actually, what we do most of the time is pushing people out of their comfort zone. So these mind games also come on board, and having someone that you can relate to, it really helps motivate you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I also noticed, maybe this is a curiosity or not, that most of the people who come to your club, at least, they come in pairs. I don't know if it's because just the people who climb the longest, they tend to form pairs because they are more motivated, or is it the mechanics of the sport that when you come to climbing, since it's so easily sociable, that you just bring a friend?
Well, I mean, if you take apart the couples, I don't agree with that most of people come in pairs. There is, of course, a big number. I mean, it's easier when you go climbing with your cousin or your friend, for a lot of reasons. Also motivation, logistics. But I think the older you get, the more motivated you are to go climb alone, even if nobody is going with you. That's what I found from my experience and from the people around me for like 16 or 17 years. It's easier. I had an experience where when I was starting where all my friends like start skipping practice. And when they were skipping, sometimes I was skipping also because I don't want to go alone. And at some point, I skipped like I don't remember, like 2 times in a row or something. And my partner again was skipping, and I was like, "Oof, I'm so tired. I came late from work. I'm going to stay home." And then I said to myself, no, if I'm staying home today, I will never be back, because this is just go like down spiral. So I start going alone. And from that point on, if I have company, great. If I need to go alone, it's okay. And I think most people are okay in going to the gym alone, especially also because, in opposite from like the other experience, being a small gym and where pretty much everybody knows each other, it's a very social experience. I know that from people outside climbing, that they think that it's a very lonely sport, like very individual sport, but for us it's actually a very social experience. And people tend to mingle a lot when you're not climbing, and it's just like, because there is a lot of rest periods. And yeah, I think people are comfortable in going with the gym without even having a partner. Of course, if you are a couple, or in your case, for instance, you started with your cousin, it's easier. And again, it's the same like in training. If you have someone that motivates you to go, okay, let's go. One is pushing the other, and maybe we go one more time, that we will go this week if because he's inviting me, or so that's a good thing. But I don't see either as a rule or as a necessary part of it.
Right. And one thing that also encourages people to attend is the personalization that you make in your gym. It is a really small space, and in a way, the fact that it's so small, everyone is so together. And the fact that you also target the problems directly to the ability of each person, it really feels like each individual is being catered to and is being taken care of. It's actually emotionally and psychologically, you feel well going there, because you're like, okay, here I can really progress.
Well, that's actually a very big bonus, I think, for people that climb in this kind of environment. Because, like you said, the route setting is very direction to the people that climb there. Because if I want to have the route setting that is teaching and promoting learning, I need to set specific, and I have to have these body images and skill potential images of the people that are climbing there, so I can help them and also push them out of the comfortable zone. So I think that's a really big experience. And also, being this small, I think it's, I have these memories from Trás-os-Montes, like my region, and going there and visit my family, and you go to the coffee, and entering there, like, let's say with my uncle, and everybody's greeting them, and like, even if people don't know you, already feel like welcome, and you feel like shit. It doesn't matter, I mean, the color of the tables or the view. It's about the familiar vibe that you feel when you enter the place. And you can be, I don't know, in a big capital, in a big nice bar or wherever, but if you are alone and you don't know anybody there's something missing, there's something missing. And I find it funny on how people experience and give priority to this kind of environment. Of course, I would love to have a bigger gym and better conditions. Everything we have there, it was made by us, or it's far from optimal. But on the other side, it's very unique, and I think it adds value for the people that are there, especially when you go and you already know everybody that's climbing you and you're relaxed. And everybody's helping each other. Something that we try to promote from the start, like this cooperation vibe instead of the competition vibe that we were talking before.
To go soon about competition, but before we go into competition, I would like to ask you something about the route setting that you do, just to finish it up. Because we were talking about the philosophy of route setting. And I also wanted to ask you the actual methodology of route setting, and I will explain better. Because I've had the privilege to observe as you route set, and it seems that you're doing it in a very exploratory manner. As in, you put the first hold, and then you look at the wall, and you put the second hold, and then you try the movement, and you see where your hand reaches. I wanted to know, like, is there something on your mind before you route set, or you just really just explore and go with the flow and see how it?
Well, it depends. There are different approaches. I was talking with my wife yesterday, and it was funny because I was telling her that most of the time when I'm putting the kid to sleep, and it takes forever.
Can you imagine?
That's when I route set the most.
In your mind.
Yeah, most of the route setting happens there. But I tend not to route set in a very strict way for me. That, like, again, it's about the movement. Or I have like this 2-3 step sequence that I want to promote. When I'm actually on the gym setting, I have already this concept. I think about what will be the better space and the better holds to promote this. And then you have this experimentation part where you need to see if it really works the way you intended, and is there a way of using these holds to break the beta that we were talking before? So there is a lot of things to take in consideration. The reach, who am I setting for? Because for me, the same problem, I can set it for a kid of 10, or I can set it for you, and it will be total different holds and total different range of moves. So, but still for me in my mind, it's the same. Just in practice, it's totally different. So yeah, you have all these variants, but also a lot of time you just go with the flow and the creativity. You know, it's like opening the fridge. Where am I going to cook today? I have this, and this. You are creative and you come up with something that you would like to eat. It's kind of the same. I was reading an interview the other day with Chris Sharma, that used to be one of the biggest champions, like in the end of the 90s. And he was telling about when he's route setting, that most of the time when he has this idea, he tries to enforce it so much that most of the time either he spends a lot of time trying to set exactly what he had in mind, or he just strips everything out and he decides to do a totally different stuff. And he finds for him that the best way to set is just go with the flow. So he starts putting the holds, and it's also a very interesting way of setting. It's like what I would like to do when I get to this position, what I think it will be different, out of the box, let's say, and you just go with it. Or there is a lot of style also, it's the way you climb, or the way you like to climb, or even the way you like to see other people climb. And then because sometimes we also have this side is a little bit like being a choreographer. Like, I will set the moves that you'll use on your dance, on your choreography. And so there is some aesthetics part on it, and also so it really depends. It's not like I always have this process and I always do it like that. And most of all, I think we need, as a routesetter, we need to try to be as more flexible in the mindset as possible. Like, don't be afraid to try different stuff. Don't be afraid to put a tire or to have fun. And don't be afraid to take it all out. But it's actually something that it's not very common for us when we're setting. It happens sometimes, but it's not common to come to the gym the next day and look at the problem, or see people climbing and are even climbing and say, oh, this is terrible, I'm going to take it off. Or I'm maybe doing some adjustments from time to time if I'm not totally fulfilled on the move, or maybe people are pushing too hard in a move that I don't want to be the focus. for instance, or I don't want to be strengths limited. Let's say, like, if you're not strong enough, you cannot do it, and I don't want that, so I will change it, make it easier or make it harder. Try to balance the boulder, because there are different sections, and if this section is really hard, then it makes no sense to have a really easy part, and so I try to do something harder or more complex after it. But yeah.
So it is either a combination of you have a movement in your head in abstract, and then you try to implement it in a way, whether it's longer, more spaced out for bigger people, or more clamped together for smaller guys, but just a movement in abstract, or you just go with the flow and see what movement you would like to do next, which will be interesting to do.
Actually, I don't know if many people noticed it, but normally when I set like 2 or 3 problems in a row, there will be a lot of common elements on both of them or on all of them, because I'm probably exploring this move and different ways of setting this move. Let's say I want to create a move where you need to lock your feet below, so it's very probable that you will find this move in problems that were set really close to each other, let's say, because I'm also learning and trying it out and see how it works, and I want to set this for adults, but I also want to set it for kids because I want them to have the same experience and the same learning. So you will find this in. So the idea of the move is the same, but then when you put it in practice, it can show up in many different ways.
That's beautiful, because the more you talk about it, it's as if you were describing an art, or as an artist, really, because that's what artists also do. They have this in mind, like a painting. I want to paint a field of grass with some crows above. And you paint this version, and then you paint that version at night, and then you paint the same painting during the day, or during the dawn, or during winter or summer. And you have this idea, and you manifest different iterations of the same idea.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's I don't remember in Sayu they do in arts here. It's tests. So it's very common on arts that they test and they do like multiple times. It's a similar. There is a big debate of route setting being an art or just being an handcraft job, let's say. But I mean, I think it's really hard to be creative and not having an artist's side on it. I mean, I don't consider myself as a routesetter. I don't consider myself an artist, but I do consider myself creative, like we talked before. So there is some artistic part of it. I'm not trying to make something beautiful in the wall, but I do like to look to the wall and see some aesthetics that are pleasant, and I do like to see people climbing it in an aesthetic way, for example. So these are all elements that come on board when you're setting. I think it's a very big picture with lots of elements from many jobs, and then there is an art side on it. I will not say that routesetters are an artist for sure, but there is an artistic part.
I understand the point, and I think that I agree, because if you were to ask me, I would not say that route setting is an art in itself, because it does not really involve the intellectualization of emotions as normally art does. Writing, painting.
It can.
Can it?
Yeah.
And not at least, maybe it can. This, again, is not something that is set in stone. It's subject to change.
Yeah. No, but I like that debate because, again, we're playing with the ego and we're trying to give you emotions, and not the same way that when you're hearing like music that it really changes your mood just for listening that music, or or that painting or that movie that will make you cry or get emotional or whatever, but the experience you're having in the gym or with a specific problem, there is a lot of emotions going on that we play and that we aim for. So again, it's not an art. I will not consider it an art, but especially because I think an artist will value its job too much to just like erase it after.
Yeah.
Because we keep doing it and we keep erasing it. So unless you make a video out of it, or it will die. But not all the art, some art is very ephemeral, so it's...
I'm just remembering of that painting. I don't know the name of the guy, but it became very famous recently. It was an exhibition, and when the painting, when it was exhibited, it tear it shreds apart.
It's self-destructive.
It's self-destructive.
Right?
So that guy clearly does not value his work also.
Well, that's also part of the art in itself, right?
Yeah, and we are talking about it because it's self-destructive.
So, yeah, but there is some art on it. Also, it also depends on how you set and what's your goal. Because, not everything that I set, I have this mindset, like I want to challenge people, or sometimes it's just something like, okay, I'm going to let the holds create a problem, so they need to learn how to swap feet, or something more basic. But as it progresses in complexity, it tends to go and touch other areas. Let's say I think it touches, that's how I'm going to put it, I think it touches these areas, but it never enters it for complete.
For sure it touches. As you mentioned, it has a creativity element in common. But when you said that it was playing with emotions, and when I said emotions, I didn't mean the emotions of others. Because for me, in my traditional training, as someone who studied literature and someone who devoted some time to thinking about this, for me an art is just an expression of the ideas and the emotions of the author. So it's not necessarily about triggering emotions in the others as triggering the ego, but more manifesting your own emotions in an art form. For instance, using classical art forms, I'm sad and I can express that sadness in a song, in a poem, in a movie. Will make others sad, maybe, but I don't think that in climbing you actually see the emotion of the author in there. But it's not to say that's not... This is just to say that, in my opinion, I think it's a bit of a stretch to call it an art form in itself. Although nowadays everything can be whatever. But for sure, it has elements of creativity. And creativity happens in many sectors of life. Climbing is certainly one of them. And creativity also happens in art, obviously. So for sure, it has elements in common.
Yeah, like I said, I don't consider her as an artist. That's a very long debate. I think it's in the industry... It's kind of said that route setting is not art, even if some people try to push it and are also exploring on how much of an art can it be. And they do really just aesthetic lines and stuff. There is amazing stuff out there that some people are exploring and doing. But that's not, let's say, that's not a priority also, So... when we are setting, that's not the main focus, that we need to do something that it's a piece of art. That comes as a bonus element, let's say. That the artistic side of it, it's like a bonus element. That first of all, you need you need to create a puzzle, you need to create something that... It's complex. We could be talking hours about it, and that's just not getting anywhere. But
I don't know why, but when you mentioned this, like people who do beautiful aesthetic lines, somehow it came to mind the idea of gourmet food. That for me, gourmet food is not really on point, in the sense that it's not designed to maximize your satisfaction, or actually, it's not designed to maximize your fulfillment, physical fulfillment while eating a dish. It's just a very good flavor in a very aesthetical, pleasing form.
Just an experience.
Yeah, and these guys that you were doing, it felt like you have a nice experience, but the athlete is not really the focus. As in, the stomach is not really the focus. It's just
I agree.
yeah.
I agree. It goes there in a way.
Just before we go into competition again,
Okay.
and I just wanted to ask you this as a personal note also, and it's in a way related to what we're talking previously about an artist or an author who tears down his own work. And I've always found it odd to me, because I take note of everything. I have a very bad memory, but I've never seen you take a picture of a route or even recreate a route that you've done before. Is this intentional, that you never repeat what you have done before? Like, repeat in the exactly same way.
Yeah, it's intentional. Yeah. I mean, it kind of it's emotionally, it's kind of complex, because I will be really disappointed to myself if I'm setting something again, because where I like to be is creative. So I think the day that I will feel that I'm doing over and over again the same thing, I'll probably get bored and just try to do something else.
I would not say necessarily over and over, but let's say last year I made a really good route or problem, a really good problem that I'm really proud of. It will be fun to try this again to see where we're at.
No, that's not how I see it. I see it, for sure there are some boulders that we remember, but what I try to understand is like, why was this so special? You know, what made it different from the others? And then try to use these elements and explore them to create something great again.
Make bouldering great again.
Yeah, let's make boulder great again, but a new one, you know. So everything needs to evolve. We have the same cycle on route setting that we have on life. It's kind of pointless to try to perpetuate something. It just needs to keep evolving and evolving. Sometimes it will evolve for something worse, but hopefully on the longer run it will evolve for something better.
That's very interesting approach. It also, again, has a more, a more expanding notion that we should not try to relive the same moment or the same experience, but instead draw on the things that we've learned and try to recreate a path forward in a new way. That, I guess, applies to everything. Yeah,
agree. But again, back to the problem. You don't want to... Again, why was that problem great? Because that's totally subjective. Just from the start, what is a great boulder for me can be really stale for you, like really boring. And will I have the same experience today on that problem that I set it 2 years ago? And we know that's also not true, because when you go climbing on the rock, that doesn't change, or that barely changes, let's say. And we know that we don't have the same thrill and the same emotion, like when you climb it for the first time, or when you climb it that it was a really big win for you, let's say. And for sure there are some routes that we like to do over and over and over again. So what I try to understand is what are the elements that give me these feelings, and then I try to recreate it on new stuff instead of just try to keep. Otherwise, I will just wash them and put them back on the wall, you know, like Hall of Fame. It's actually funny, because I once kind of think, maybe it will be interesting, like these, let's say, 5-star problems that everybody finds that are, let's say, better than the generality of the others. maybe it will be interesting to just like take pictures, film them, like so in 10 years or in 20 years, or I can replicate them like in the Hall of Fame. And that can be an exercise that probably I would appreciate, like when you have the enough distance and like, okay, let's do this again. It's like go and watch your favorite movie from when you were a kid, or like it brings you back to your childhood or when you were a teenager, and there are some feelings there. It can be an interesting experience, but it will be just that. It's like it's a special day, a special. But I didn't even progress with that idea yet. So I'm not sure if, because again, it's evolving all the time. Also, the tools that we have are evolving all the time. Also, the athletes we are setting are evolving all the time. The level just keeps rising and rising and rising. So a really challenging and good problem today, it can be probably a medium or very poor problem tomorrow. So just go. Just keep going.
I'm still glad that I asked you and that I learned your answer, since I understand what you mean and I admire what you mean, which is a bit hard for me to understand in a way, because by profession I'm an archivist, and an archivist, the job means taking care of old things or taking care of the information that is stored. So for me, the natural mindset will be, I'm gonna take a picture, store it, recreate it.
Well,
so
that's also why it's good to have teams, because different people bring different perspectives, different philosophies, different methodologies. And for instance, if I had someone in the team that has this archive mindset, probably from time to time, maybe this idea will be interesting. There is a lot of creative stuff that you can do after, like, okay, let's pick the top 10 and people will climb and will vote which the best, what's the favorite. I mean, the best, it's kind of also very subjective. Yeah, like there is some route setting competitions. I don't know if you ever heard about it, and it also plays with this. It's interesting that you go there and you try to set your best problem. What's your best problem?
For who? For who?
For who? What
time,
like,
yeah.
It's my best problem what I like to climb the most. It's my best problem what the others like to climb the most. Is my best problem really hard? Is my best problem really easy and everybody can climb it?
I didn't know about that. It's interesting.
But
okay.
So yeah, what actually happens is that they do this kind of competition that each setter sets 1, 2, 3 problems, and then people vote for the problems they like the most, and this is the best route setting.
That sounds a bit boring, to be honest.
I mean, it's an interesting exercise, and I think it's this kind of ideas keeps pushing the industry forward, because then the route settings will be learning from each other. I mean, there is a lot of stuff to learn when you see others setting, how they set, how they work, and also the feedback on what do the public value the most. Again, why was this problem the most value? Even maybe probably this will happen that the routesetters will think this is the best problem, but then the audience thinks this is the best problem. So these are all concepts that it's interesting to explore and learn from, but I don't see it like going anywhere further than that.
Just I was wondering, in terms of route setting in competitions, I feel it's a bit tricky, because when you're in a competition, you, like, let's say a World Cup or European Cup, there is a specific level of difficulty that you must meet, because you need to address some problems for world-class athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose that the organization has some guidelines on how to route set.
There are guidelines with levels, and you have a routesetter chief that is there to enforce that guidelines.
But at the same time, route setting is a creative process, and each person has its own style. So in a competition context, how can you manage your individual approach to the official requirements?
Again, it's I think it works the same way that I told you before, that I have this idea and I can set this idea for you, or I can set it for the kids. I just need to play with the sizes and the holds and see if it's working. I think the same happens in the competitions where you're setting for a very high level. You still have this idea of moves that you want to promote and you want to be the better, but you'll be setting for their size, and you'll probably be setting with really hard holds that probably most of us won't even be able to use, but they're so strong that they can. And it goes a little bit on that way, I think. Yeah. Also, you need to understand that even for us can be a very abstract image, but for them, they are used to set for these athletes, so they have a very clear image on what these athletes are able to do and they are not able to do. For instance, for me, I'm very comfortable setting for most of my athletes, and when I do, I have a huge confidence, like the size is correct, the strength is correct. And it was funny because I had these many examples over the time that I'm setting, for instance, with Mota, which is helping me most of the time. And we're set, okay, who are we setting for? We're setting for this kid, 10 years old. And he said, oh, it's too far. And I look, no, it's perfect. And he said, okay. And then we see it and it's perfect. So I have this huge confidence because I see them climbing so many hours per week that I already have this visual memory of what to reach. It's something innate. I have no idea on exactly how much it is, but when I set it, just feels right, you know? And I think there is a lot of this innate perspective on the route setting, and as they are setting for them and they know them from competitions, most of them will set for the national teams to practice. So they spend a lot of time with these athletes, they know each other, and they know how far they can push and how far they can go with it.
So you just know based on your experience, large experience observing the athletes.
Yeah.
And these guys that route set in the world stages, do they exclusively route set as a pros or stay with the athletes all the time?
I'm not really sure. I think many of them, they have hold companies, so they're also developing that side and trying to come up with new stuff. I know that others have also their own gyms and they set for the gyms, but also on these gyms, when they have these really good route setters, all the good athletes tend to go to these gyms, so they also can try and practice their route setting for these kind of audience there. So they are always connected in a way, I think.
Yeah, so they are just familiar with the really high class athletes, and they, the same way that you have an intuition to the people that go to your gym, they might have an intuition to the world class athletes.
Exactly.
Because do you ever aspire to route set in such a big stage? A world.
I mean, I'm in the pool for the paraclimbing routesetters, like 11 people in the world that are in this pool, and then they can be called anytime to be setting. So there is this kind of hope, although paraclimbing doesn't compare to the normal climbing in level of how hard you need to set. On the other side, these athletes are monsters and they climb really, really hard, even if it's paraclimbing. Most of them probably climb harder than me. So that will be a huge challenge for me. I had this experience that I would love for sure, but we will see. We will see how it goes. I'm in the pool for 2 years now, I think, or 3. But then we had the corona, a lot of competitions were cancelled. I'm not getting younger, so lots of new people coming to the business. We'll see how it goes, but I would like it. It will be a huge experience.
Paraclimbing, I don't know if this word is so familiar for everyone, but what we would say in Portuguese is escalada adaptada, which basically means if someone is somehow physically impaired, it's paraclimbing.
Yep.
Is it the limitations are just physical or also mental?
No. there are mental impairments in other sports, as you know, but not on climbing. They don't have categories, at least for now, for that. So it's just physical impairment. But not all the physical impairment is considered a category, let's say, for paraclimbing. So there are very specific areas. Just for the audience to understand, I can go like really not on topic, but visual impairment. It can either be total blindness or just like a really low vision. Amputations or not being able to move the members.
Any member or one member?
Both members normally. That there are some categories where they have the legs but they cannot move them.
So they just go with their arms?
Yeah, just upper body strength.
No, I understand the monsters. Just climbing with your arms. There must be some beasts.
And then we have some category which are the RP, that people have the full members, let's say, but they don't have the same strengths on the members, coordination. Normally this comes from injuries that people got over the time, and it's the hardest and the more complex to understand, even to classify.
Because it's also very individual. Like one injury is not the same injury.
Yeah.
Because it's a degree. Like.
And it's not clear. For instance, I know that they have a battery of tests for this to understand where the athlete will fit on each category, and this takes long. And from our experience with Tanya, for example, when we entered the classification for her, she's an amputee on the leg, so she just shows the leg, and it's like, okay, you can go. I mean, there's no question if you don't have a leg.
Yeah, it's obvious.
There's no debate, so it is what it is. It's the same for blinds. Blind people don't see it all, so it's this category. But when you enter the low vision, you start putting percentage on people, and 1% can be the difference, this category or the other category, and then it kind of gets also a little bit on the air if it's the right or wrong category.
Yeah, so. It feels more like a spectrum rather than an obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's from 1 to 5%, and then from 6 to 15. I mean, but deciding if you are 5 or 6 can be tricky. It's kind of the same happening on the RP categories.
Do the arm amputees compete against the leg amputees, or is it two classes? I've always wondered this.
Well, that actually happened now on the World Cup because there was only 3 amputees on this competition. I'm talking about the women, which was the case where you have the athlete. So they merged the category with the RPs, where they have all the limbs. So in the end, they compete on the, like, say, general ranking. And then I think they punctuate for their own ranking. So if you don't have there's actually a really complex diagram that if you don't have enough people on this category, they will merge it to the next category, and so on until you have enough people.
Oh, I see. So it's the worst case scenario kind of plan that if there is not enough athletes, we will find a way to.
Yeah, it's everybody climbing in the same.
Seems quite harsh for the routesetters, because I imagine that route setting for someone with one arm is entirely different of route setting for someone with one leg.
Yeah, it's complex, but they have figured out some ways of what categories work with other categories and what don't. So, for instance, the RP that have weakness on the legs are competing with people that don't have one of the legs. But they are not competing with a person that doesn't have one arm, let's say, because that's a total different route setting. For instance, because each impairment puts total different challenges on the athlete and also on the route setter, and some are you can merge and some you can't.
So in this case, it will never happen that a guy with one leg will compete directly with a guy with one arm.
No.
Not that kind of merge.
No.
Okay, I was wondering.
And they don't merge gender also. So a woman will never compete with a man or vice versa.
In terms of paraclimbing, the best example we know is Tanya Chaves. Tanya Chaves is the athlete that, at least in SEB, competes. She, as you mentioned, she lost one leg, but she turned it around and she's really committed into climbing. And as far as I know, she's the only Portuguese representative that she even competed last week or this week in the World Cup.
Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah, and I've noticed that when you talk about her, it feels like you are really, really proud about her, which is obviously because she's the one of the only Portuguese competitors in the world stage, but also because she's your athlete. And it seems as if she is your project, your champion, and a way like your dream to fight the inertia of competitiveness that there is in this country, in Portugal. As we know, she is very barely, just to say nothing, supported by the federation. She has to take her own vacations, she has to pay her own trips, so
yeah, there is no legal support for the athletes. Well, you need to understand, Tanya is like the face of my baby, which is my project was the paraclimbing. So I started paraclimbing way before I met Tanya. It was 2014, and she says, well, I start working with people that are impaired mentally or physically, and we start organizing national competitions. And at some point, a friend of mine that came to climb said, "Oh, I have a girl. She's really motivated to sport. She told me something about climbing." And I said, "Oh, bring her." And when she came, we connected. And it's like, "Oh, you have potential." And I told her, "If you take this seriously." I said to her, I'm going to be the first coach on the World Cup to take a paraclimbing athlete. If you take this seriously, you will be the first athlete.
Whoa.
And then, so it was. I mean, it can sound as a brave statement, but at the same point, nobody was doing it, and still nobody is doing it. So it falls in the natural sequence of things. And yeah, she's giving the face to the project, and it's a very personal project. I did a lot of volunteer during the years around that, and still do. But also it gives a lot back, and a lot of it's life teaching around it. So yeah, and about Tanya, it's that. Then it's the other part. Then it's the athlete itself. She's really strong. She's reaching a level that she can engrave her name in the history of the sport and the country. I mean, not only being the first, but probably it will be the first medals. It will be the first Olympics. There is a huge path for her to go, and where she can make a brilliant history and statement, I think.
She did get a medal.
It's a complex, because we're talking about the merge. She's the third in her category, but when they merge, they give the medals on the overall ranking. So the girls with two legs were getting the medals.
So her category was not...
She's on AL2, which is the amputees.
Right.
But because there was not... I think they need 6 athletes to have finals. Because there was not athletes, they merged with the RP, which is these people that have all the limbs, but not the same strengths on all the limbs. And so they all got merged, and then she didn't make it to the finals on that overall category. Oh, even if she's the third on her category.
It's quite unfair in a way.
Well, yeah, I agree, but they're struggling with having too many categories and few participants, let's say.
Because from her perspective, she could not have done anything better. There was just no other athletes available to fill the other categories.
I mean, it's unfair. I will just keep it that way.
Yeah. No, it's not surprised because when you were mentioning so many different categories, I was wondering how do they actually fill all these categories, or where do they find all these people? And it's so many variables.
Yeah,
So it's not surprising. Anyway, I believe you mentioned that the paraclimbing work you do is volunteering.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
How come you not get paid for this? How come someone can expect you to dedicate all your hours voluntarily, as with no financially drawback?
Well, it's I mean, we had some athletes like Tanya that they come and they train with the others, so, and that's an inclusive training. It's paid like the others, but the segregated training we did with mental impairment people, that was always a volunteer project.
How come the federation does not support anything?
If we go to the federation, then we need 3 more podcasts just about that. But our federation is not supported by the state, so there are no funds. There are no funds supported by the state. There are no funds to support any project. Otherwise, it will be supported. Same way that Tanya is not supported to go outside. It's a legal issue that has 20 years, many stories. I don't think it's going to be interesting to be speaking about that right now. So
yeah, we're going to politics.
No, but I mean, I have no problem talking about it, but if we're going to talk about it, then we'll need a lot of time because it's a really complex and long story. So I think it's just better to.
Yeah, let's just keep it. I just wanted to mention it because I knew that Tanya was competing from her own pocket in the sense, and the federation it has some issues and there is no agreement and blah blah blah. But I didn't know that the work you were doing was also volunteering, and I'm impressed.
Well, all the club. I mean, these projects, although we do it by volunteer, gave us some support from the municipality, gave us visibility. We kind of applied projects with other NGOs that are working with the kids, and we got some support from that side also. So it was not 100% not supported, let's say, but on my personal level, I never took a cent from that. It's everything. It's unpaid.
Yeah, I feel that is a sad thing, and I would like to see that changed because I believe that people who are unique in the sense that they provide a unique contribution to society, they should be rewarded financially, and we should not expect them just to commit their time just because.
Yeah. Well, I get what you say. I'm okay with doing some volunteers. I mean, that's an example I learned from my mom, and that's something that I want to honor, let's say, that heritage. So I'm very comfortable with that side. But on the other side, as the project keeps growing and growing and growing, also the expectations and the pressure keeps going, and it gets to a point where you say, I mean, as a volunteer, this is as far as I can go. Then if you want to grow this in a more serious way, you probably will need a bigger team and people need to get paid. So there is this balance. I'm okay with doing some volunteer, but I'm not okay we all have bills to pay, and
of course.
So
I hope you can get some money from it in the future. But again, not to go into the political side of the conversation, let's go back to the paraclimbing and the point of fairness. One thing that I wanted to also mention is whether paraclimbing can even be fair to begin with, or even if it should be fair. Because one argument that can be made is that the point is not to provide a competitive environment for the athletes, so not to actually replicate a fair environment for competition, but given their personal history and given their accident and the story of the accidents they suffered to be in the paraclimbing, could it be seen as a means for them to overcome their own physical limitations and to become the better versions of themselves, just to give them a reason to get up in the morning and say, I'm not gonna cry about my injury, I'm gonna...
I get the point, but I don't agree with the point. I'll try to explain why. I think the point is to give them competition, and that's the fair part. I mean, if you want to give them equal opportunities, having a proper competition is part of having these equal opportunities. That's why. And that's why they have all these categories. Otherwise, you just do a mixed event and people come and are invited. It's a more chilled. There are some stuff like this. We also do something similar with that here in Portugal. So nothing wrong with it. But when we're talking about World Cups or championships, we're talking about these athletes having a fair opportunity to compete, because some people are really passionate and they are really motivated to compete. So it's only fair that they have the chance to do it in a fair way. That being said, we're talking about paraclimbing, which, like I said, the Americans call adapt climbing, which we use kind of the same meaning translation in Portugal with escalada adaptada. And when we talk about adapted sport, we need to adapt. So even though we will try to give these people a fair chance to have a fair competition, we know that it will never be 100% fair. But if you think about the non-adapt competitions, this also happens. I mean, some people are higher, some people are slimmer, or whatever. So not everybody is the same, and we need to be on board with that. But I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Some of the merges, on my perspective, are not fair, especially taking in consideration that these categories were already addressed. They are already designed by the proper federation. So then I have mixed feelings of how some of the merges at least are done. With that said, it's better to have a bad competition than not having any competition. So I also think they're trying to do their best, and it's a long way. I think some of the decisions are not the best and not defending the best interest for even the federation and the athletes. But well, I mean, it's a learning progress for everybody. So we'll see how it goes.
Because it's relatively a new sport, also.
Yeah.
So I imagine there's a lot of room to grow and to expand and just to experiment.
There just been some amendments to the rules this year, and I think they will learn also from that, and they will keep changing it. So it's evolving. It's not static.
I can tell that by experience also, because when I joined the SEP, your climbing club, I believe it was nearly 2 years ago now, and I remember that one of the things that you told us when we joined is some rules, like 3 seconds on the top, you can't use the bolt holes, you can't use the walls that don't have the holes on them, you need to, in a competition setting, you can only do 5 attempts before you are disqualified or before you have to move on. And it's curious because the other day I was watching some female World Cup competition and everything was upside down. They could use the bolts, they could use the walls without the holes, they just went to the top, hanged 1 second, slapped on it, say I got this. They had 4 minutes to try, and so it was not the 5 attempts. So this is just to say that what you told me and I was expecting to see in the competition, it was completely different in terms of rules. And that's fair. I'm not saying it's on you, but I believe that...
No, I can explain you all the stuff.
I believe that it is just a reflection of how experimental the sport is being and how experimental the competition.
No, it's actually that part is just being a little bit lazy, because what these rules point you to the competition format that we try to teach there. So even if you don't want to compete, you'll be doing the sport there inside our gym with the competition rules, let's say, or guidelines at least. It's like you're going to play football with your friends. You cannot use your hands to play football. Okay, it's a rule. Of course, if you are with your friends and you agree that you can use the hand in the ball, then it's up to you. But normally, football, only the goalkeeper will be able to use the hands, and only in a specific area of the field. So all the rules that we said are what happens on the competitions, but with a lazy component. Why? And especially because we have a very limited space. If I don't want to use you, if I don't want you to use the wall, I can put as a routesetter tape in the areas that will limit. But again, for me, that will be limiting also the boulder next on the other side, and then I need to tell to the person climbing the other boulder, oh, but for you, you can use the wall here. It's just, this tape is just, so it doesn't make much sense for us in the space management issue. Also the bolts, there are some rules about which bolts you can use and you cannot use. It's hard to explain when you're just a beginner, and most of the time it's a routesetter job to just put something on top of the bolts so you won't be, we even have this, there are some pieces that will block it, but then when we are setting and stripping the problems, it's a really a pain in the ass, let's say, to take these hold covers out and then it just adds more time. When it's something really used, that I can say to you, just don't use it, because it's kind of pointless for me to be creating a problem, something like interesting for you, and then you just like.
Yeah, but I was, in terms of bolts and holes, I was not actually mentioning the holes of the holds, as in when you put a screw.
Yeah.
But rather the hole on the wall itself. Where
it's totally forbidden for your hands. You can use it with your feet.
Oh, on your feet you can, because I saw these girls using them for the feet, and was
no,
like, I didn't know this.
No, yeah. I mean, this girl the American girl that you're mentioning, after that I learned that she's been doing it for quite a long time. So she's just like practiced to be able to use it. It's something that the rules don't address. So she's just kind of explored a wormhole on the rules.
Okay.
And for now it's working. I don't know. Probably I think the reaction, because for the routesetter and for the competition perspective, what I think the feeling is that it's like, okay, I can say nothing because it's legal, but I'm not happy that you're doing it, because that's totally not the goal of the problem and the route setting. So I think they will just start coming up, especially on the slabs, because it's where you can have an advantage with that. They will just start putting blank walls with no holes on it, and they will keep the problem apart from it. But there's, again, when you're doing these problems, there is also this game of mice and cat, and it's part of the game. She's really smart. She trained herself to explore this wormhole, and she's doing great. I mean, as a coach, if I was her coach, I would be super proud. If I was the routesetter on the competition, I would be extremely disappointed. It's part of the game,
It's a beautiful metaphor of the cat and mouse. Like, there's a routesetter who is trying to force a certain way, and then there are the athletes who are trying to break free from that box and exploit everything to their advantage and see how they can perform the best.
Also, you were saying the 3-second rule. Well, that changed 2 years ago, I think, when they changed the bonus for zones. They came up with the concept of controlling a hold.
So you go there and you seem like you're not struggling. They just
you don't
give
need
it
to be
you.
but so you don't need to be there for X amount of time like you had to be before, but you need to show that you are in control, which is more abstract concept.
Yeah, it feels like
so. Especially because we have a lot of kids and we want to set a good example for them, and we don't want this kind of mistake happening that you climbed a route on a competition and you just came from the top too early because you didn't wait for the sign of the judge. So we just push them to be there the 3 seconds, even if it's not necessary. We're just trying to avoid mistakes on a competition environment. Then it's totally up to you, as you know, because again, it's an ego issue. Even if we say this, it's totally up to you if you want to be 3 seconds there or 1 second there. Some people don't really follow that rule, and we don't push that rule on everybody.
But I mean, if you are struggling in some boulder, and then you come to the top, and the top is something you can be comfortable in. Personally, I would prefer to stay there the 3 seconds and say, yeah, I got this, no problem, rather than just come down 1 second early or 2 seconds early. Because if you're comfortable, you can spare those 2 seconds to be there and say, yeah, it's really okay.
Well, I'm going to give you my perspective as an athlete then, because I never climbed to compete. So, but I follow the same philosophy. So if I'm in a really comfortable top, I'm okay with just being there 1 second or wherever, because there's no challenge there for me. And so I don't really care about the top anymore. I matched, okay, I come out. But if the top is really challenging me, I will do my best to stay there the 3 seconds and even more, because I want to transport myself to this perspective that if I had to stay here the 3 seconds, would I be able to? And then I need to push myself, and I want to push myself to be there the 3 seconds. But I don't want to cheat on myself. I know some people like to. I think I'm really strict with myself, especially on that kind of stuff. So again, it's just practice. It's just having fun. But if it's a challenge, the 3 seconds, I want to have that challenge. If it's not a challenge, then you do whatever you please, because it doesn't really matter. I used to say a lot to my athletes that I don't care if you get to the top as a coach. I totally don't care. Like I said, we put this guy. I want you to be doing the stuff correctly, like in the proper way. I want you to be being smart, exploring, proper technique, and then the rest, it will be a consequence on the long run. So I don't care about this specific top. I care that everything else is being done properly, then the outcome will be good in most of the time.
It's also the message of focus on the journey, not on the goal.
Totally, yeah, I know. Totally.
Which is also, again, a message that applies to many things in life. And also to not only to sport, but to academic training, to socializing. Just focus on what's around you and enjoy the moment. And
that's actually life.
Yeah, trust the process and you'll get to the good way.
Yeah, and trust the process, exactly.
But still, it's fascinating that the sport is innovating so much, that the rules are changing in 1-2 years, that now we see that is going to, for the first time, be incorporated into the Olympics, which will certainly bring more attention, and with more attention also more exploitation by the athletes, which will eventually lead to new rules or new adaptation to say, okay, this doesn't work.
New formats.
Yeah,
they will change it for sure. Sorry, they already changed some part of the format. And I mean, I think the sport climbing is quite a new sport, and we know that if you want to get to a very professional level, it needs to be profitable. So I think they're still learning on how to market and monetize the sport and the events themselves. And I predicted the rules, all the format, how the competitions happen. Maybe in 10 years, 15 years, we'll be looking back to the competitions nowadays and we'll be laughing, because I think they will be dramatically different from what they are now.
For sure. There's no way that is going to remain the same.
No.
And
actually, I think it's quite bad and amateur format. So
a good example, I think, is chess, because chess is so old. Traditionally, it's the sport. I don't know if I should call it the sport or a game, but it exists for so long. And what is interesting for me is that chess, during its existence and during its evolution, has hit many roadblocks. So the people that are involved in the chess community, from time to time, they have to create new rules to make chess appealing. I think it even happened recently, like the pro matches, they're always ending in a draw because the people just knew the game. They knew how to try to win, and they knew that if they could not win, if they made a certain
they can
move or
block
mistake,
the game for the other.
they just knew how to block the game. And it was so boring to watch because you knew it was either one makes a really big mistake or it draws. So it becomes quite predictable.
And you don't do big mistakes at that level. So.
Yeah, they are really, really pros. Yeah. And I was wondering if climbing, the same way that chess finds new rules from time to time to keep the game fresh, do you feel that climbing might need to invent itself and we see some mechanism like the mobile holds?
No, I don't see it on that way. I mean, I think what's happening on the sport, it's already spectacular, let's say. It's the format and the way the competitions are organized, the way they happen, the way they are even filmed. That is really an amateur way. Like if you watch the stream, it's too long. They're not capturing. I mean, you can tell that people that are filming, they don't really understand what's going on, so they don't know what to focus, and only one person climbing at a time, lots of time that no action at all because the athlete is resting, in sinking. So they need to change the format in a way that anyone that doesn't climb can look at it and see a show, you know, something like a thrill, like the same way that we watch hundreds of sports that we don't probably ever practice or just, and we still like to watch them because they have this show component.
So when you mean about changes in format, it's more about changes in the organizational side of the event, but not into the actual climbing itself.
No, I mean, climbing itself, it's evolving because it changed dramatically in the last 15 years with the introduction of volumes, the new holds, very huge holds. Now we have these dual texture holds. But all of these, they tend to help the routesetters enforce some kind of movement. So we want to make sure that this will be the way of climbing properly and getting to the top. With that said, I think there will be probably some evolution on that side. So it will keep going forward on that side of new holds, new challenges on that. But I think what is right now making climbing as hard to sell is that it's totally impossible to have it, for example, on TV. That the great struggle that there was when climbing was in the Olympics was that the Olympic board, they just wanted speed climbing.
Not the traditional.
They didn't want.
Due to the time it takes?
Yeah.
Or speed climbing is 10 seconds. Like you start filming.
No, it's
gone.
It's 5.2 seconds now.
You start
for
filming,
the male record.
you forget to press the record and it's gone.
First of all, it's the fastest sport in the Olympics right now, speed climbing. Also for them, that's really good because then you have timetables. You know, okay, at 10 there will be this, at 10:05 we have the speed climbing, at 10:20 I will be giving the medals for climbing, you know. So in the logistics side, it gets really predictable on what is going on and how and when, how long it takes, how long we need. And with the normal climbing, for example, the routes, they have an X amount of time. I'm not sure how long it is, but you don't know if the athlete is going to fall in the first hold and just be there for 5 seconds, or it's going to be there for 10 minutes, let's say. and this multiplied for X athletes, that gives you a range of time that then either you don't have anything to show or you don't have time enough to show everything.
Right.
You know, they need to change. They came up with a combination of disciplines. That was the solution, but for Paris, there will be a different already. It will be speed on one discipline, and then boulder and lead. It will be the combined discipline, the other. So like 2 medals for climbing on Paris, 1 medal for climbing on Tokyo. But there are formats like the Adidas Superstar and stuff like that that are way more appealing, especially I think for people that have no connection with the sport. I mean, if you watch just the finals right now of a boulder competition, world competition, we're talking normally roughly between 3 hours and a half to 4 hours. And if you just time the amount of time that they are climbing, it's probably under 1 hour for sure.
So there's a lot of filler time. Just idle, just feeling.
Yeah, you know that he's putting shock, he's sinking, he falls, he asks for a brush. I mean, if you are really engaged in sport, you are used to it and you're not really paying attention to it anymore. But if you are not, then at some point it's just like, it's too much time, nothing going on. Then this athlete goes out, then another comes in, waits for the clock to start again. So it takes a lot of time, and they need to think of either putting some time element on it or having more people climbing same boulders at the same time with more cameras.
That does make sense from a TV direction perspective, because it's something you don't really think about normally. You're just a viewer. You just assume that the content will be there, but you're not doing the schedule, not doing the program. And having unpredictable timelines can really mess up how you plan for it.
I'll give you an example. With football, for instance, some finals, you have the 90 minutes, then you have 3 plus whatever extra time, and normally that's it. But when you have a final, then if they are tied, you need to add, it's 30 minutes playing plus the breaks, 40 more minutes for it. But then if they're still tied, then you have the penalties. And the
penalties can last forever.
And the penalties can last virtually forever. So if you have, for instance, the news coming after and you want to do a live with some politician or whatever, then you're screwed because you cannot plan it. And we're just talking about one game and one sport. When you have the Olympics and you have so many stuff happening at the same time, and you have the ceremonies for medals, and you know that you're doing this sport at 10, you're doing this sport at 10:15, you're doing this. So you need to be able to predict a lot of what's going on. So there are a lot of pressure also on the organization for it. So I try to understand both sides. I think climbing totally has its place on the Olympics, but I think they will need to refurbish all the formats for a more appealing and more understandable and fastest format.
That makes sense, and it seems likely because, as we've been saying, it's quite young and they are still experimenting. In terms of changes that I could think of, at least from the experience of watching the women competition, the World Cup, they had, I believe it was 3 or 4 boulders.
Yeah.
And then they went one at a time, one athlete at a time, one boulder at a time.
Yeah.
So the first boulder,
6 athletes.
So each athlete in succession, they don't see each other.
Exactly.
So that's also intentional, I assume.
Yeah.
By design.
It's called on site. So you only see the problem when you're going to climb, and then you cannot see anybody climbing because that can give precious beta information. So
although they do know some information from the crowd cheers, Like,
yeah, and they actually is not totally on site because they have some visualization time. So they visit each problem. They can only touch the start holds, but I mean they get a picture of, and they are experienced enough to understand what's the challenge at least. But I mean on the Adidas model, for I don't think it's perfect, but it's just a different concept. You have two athletes doing the exactly same problem side by side at the same time.
so that means duplicating the boulders.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get, because it means additional effort by the route setters and the organization to double the space.
Well, not exactly, because they already have that space. Because they said one man, one woman, one man, one woman, and so on. So, for instance, if you do man one day or one moment and then woman other moment, you can just, with the same size, doing the same. But you cannot do it with the same walls, because right now the walls, they are not symmetric.
Right.
And you need symmetric walls for that, for example. So that's one thing that automatically needs to change. You need to have to create new walls just for that format. But like, I'm not saying that's the perfect format, it's just an idea. About the time, it's easier to manage, and having two athletes competing at the same time, even if one falls,
The other is on the wall and you can film it. But
there's still some action for the viewer, you know.
right. But
And also you have this thrill of comparing two athletes at the same time. You know, for the point of the viewer, I think it's more interesting.
doesn't that undermine the fact that people or the organization does not want the athletes to look at each other and to learn from each other?
That's why they put time. So on the Adidas model, the fastest to get on the top wins.
Whoa, that's harsh. That's
Yeah.
another layer of
That's
competition.
another layer, yeah. I mean, for sure, wherever the format is, time will need to be a component, because that's what we're talking about, that needs to be managed and addressed.
But one thing is, okay, I have 4 minutes to get to the top. Other thing is, there is this person next to me that is also trying the same thing and can cut my 4 minutes. So it's not about 4 minutes.
No, it can be 20 seconds.
Yeah, it's not about the time that you have left. It's about the time that you already spent.
Hmm.
Well, that seems very harsh.
Yeah.
A lot of pressure to manage.
Well, like I said, it's going to be a different format, kind of a different sport, but with the format that we're seeing right now, I mean, we're trying to solve the problem of the federation right now, but you can have it on a square where they are climbing the same problems, so you have the same plans.
Inclinations?
No, I mean for the viewers, like it's like they are climbing side by side, but they can be on the opposite sides.
Okay.
And then you don't need to put the time of who gets there first, and you can kind of have a bigger chance of always have somebody climbing and not just like staring at the wall and putting
Because
shot.
in this case, they will be back to back and not watching each other.
Yeah, for example.
But what if they just fall and they look behind and they see, oh, this guy is doing this better this way?
No, because they won't, because I'm talking, you see a square.
Oh, a division in the middle.
Yeah.
A physical division in the middle.
So if one is climbing here and the other is climbing here, so the backs are there and the backs are there, so they don't never see each other.
So the walls are back to back.
Yeah.
Oh, that's quite interesting.
But for the viewer, when you put it on the TV, they are side by side.
That's very interesting.
So they don't. Of course, for the perspective, if you're doing is in an arena or something like, then you're only able to watch one of them.
Yeah.
You're always missing out on the other. But for then you can have like these big TVs to.
It doesn't feel to be a problem. Just you are watching one, and as you said, you have the big television showing the other one.
The other one on the other side.
Should be doable. I don't see
I
that
think,
to be a deal breaker.
I mean, I'm quite sure that they will be on board with people that are used to work on televisions, and they will come up with some format that works and it's better. But right now, it's too long to be commercially appealing to TVs, and why I'm saying that because I have the feeling that climbing needs to be able to enter the TVs to get to the next step of being a very popular sport, and I mean to evolve to other level. Let's say
to TVs the same way that football is showing on weekends on TV or futsal.
I mean, kind
or
of,
volleyball.
yeah, kind of all. Football is like in a totally different league, but all the other sports are on TV. Like, I mean, the winter sports, the snooker. I mean, you turn on like Eurosport, for example, and there is like pretty much all the sports there. But it will be pretty much impossible right now, unless it's speed climbing, to watch something of this format on Eurosport, because they are not going to give you 4 hours with a 1 hour action, let's say, and then the rest is just like waiting.
So from what I understand, right now you can't watch climbing in TV. It's
No.
just in streams.
Yeah, it's
YouTube.
just streams on the YouTube.
That sounds weird.
That's why I'm telling you, I think it's still a very amateur format, and I'm pretty sure that the Olympics will put pressure on speeding up the model to something more.
Yeah, it is to be expected that the marketing will come into the game, and then the companies that are involved, they want to further expand their advertisement and their assets.
Yeah, or at least some rules. I mean, same happened on basket, that they were just telling, and then they gave him time. You have X seconds to try to score, otherwise you lose ball possession, something
Okay.
like that. So
That's interesting. Going a bit more specific, in terms of speed climbing, in terms of the route setting itself, from what I understand, the route is always the same.
mhm.
No matter the competition, it always stays the same, so it acts as a sort of benchmark for competitiveness.
Yeah.
Could in this way it act like a 100-meter sprint, where you have the 100-meter sprint and then the rest is just a test of time and a proof of the athlete's effort?
It's exactly that. So it comes more into the other philosophy of what we normally see, for instance, on the sprint. And that's why the big community in climbing was so disappointed, let's say, when the Olympics tried to enforce the speed on the Olympics instead of the other disciplines, that for the majority of the climbers, it's what climbing is about.
The slower, the roll.
Yeah, the problem solving, the getting there, not in the fastest way, but in the best way. We also know that if you want to do something really hard in our sport, you can. Most of the time, you cannot do it like really fast, like almost running. So pushing you to do something really fast will end up in having easier routes. Otherwise,
yeah, of course.
so we're already sacrificing on the technicality of the routes and how hard you can push athletes on this side. So people were a little bit disappointed on it, but again, it's different mindsets. Now the athletes that never did the speed climbing for the Olympics, they need to practice. And they start doing it, and some of them, they are doing quite okay. Of course, it's never the same if you only did that for all your life, this kind of training. On the other side, the climbers that do speed climbing and are like really fast, insanely fast, normally they are average climbers on the other disciplines, and they will like...
Average at the world-class level?
No, I mean average probably even in our climbing level.
Is it that specific in terms of muscles you develop,
yeah,
technique
because
you develop?
That's another thing. You're pushing your body into a total different direction of what you need when you're climbing the rest. Especially if you're climbing rope, for instance, which is an enduro. It's like asking an athlete to do the marathon and then the sprint. You know, it's
that different.
Yeah, or even and trekking in trail, where the field is totally different and you need to pay attention to a lot of elements, and then it's just like the sprint where you don't even need to worry about the track itself, just like do it as fast as possible, the straight line. So yeah, it's more like that. I think it's more like on track and then doing trail on the mountain, and try to, even if you're running, you have to deal with a lot of elements all the time. It's always new, it's never the same. So
I had no idea it was so different, because from what I understand as well, in the Olympics it was incorporated as a free format. So the disappointment of the people that felt that slower climbing was not well represented actually worked, because in Olympics you have the fast climbing, the rope, right, and bouldering.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
And if they are all so different, and if the athletes must compete in the three of them, doesn't that exclude kind of the types of score? As in, if you're very good at fast climbing, you're not going to perform so well in bouldering or in rope, and vice versa.
That kind of screws up the speed climbers for a medal, because these three disciplines already existed before the Olympics. And when the Olympic committee tried to bring climbing on board, they just wanted speed.
Because it was the fastest, easier to direct,
exactly.
Easier to feel.
But with that said, it's like, let's say on football, we're just going to have goalkeepers. And then you're missing out on the great athletes like Messi, Ronaldo, all the big figures that everybody knows. They won't be there because they don't even do that. So, but then there was this big discussion. The International Federation tried to enforce the other disciplines, and they came up, they wanted individual medals per discipline. Per discipline, and they came up with this combined format. So there will be one man gold medal for the whole three and one gold woman medal for the whole three. But this puts in a big disadvantage the guys that did speed climbing, because they have no chance on the rest.
Because they are good in 1 out of 3, so they're bad in 2. Whereas the other guys, they are good in 2 out of 3.
And it's also easier to be good in boulder leading, and then you just practice and you are okay-ish on the speed, just enough to make it a couple rounds, let's say. And then it's almost impossible for the others to learn all the complexity of movement and stuff in a couple of years that these guys have been developing, to be able to deal with the problem of finals of boulder, for instance, or it's so they are in a big disadvantage.
Seems quite unfair. So what is the argument against separating the classes and giving one medal per class?
I'm not really sure. I think because it was also on Tokyo, it's an invited sport. I don't have enough English level to explain it, but when you are the country that are hosting the Olympics, you can propose to the Olympic Committee 4 sports that will be part of your Olympic Games. So on Japan, they came up with climbing because it's really popular and also they are really good. So they have high expectations of medals there. Baseball, skateboard, and I'm not sure about the other. I think it was something around surf or something like that, but I'm not clear on the fourth. So, but this being there once doesn't mean that you're going to be an Olympic sport for the rest of this sessions of the years. After that, climbing was elected a climbing sport on Rio when Rio happened, to be in Paris for the first time. So actually, officially, as an Olympic sport, it will be only on Paris. So this is kind of just a format for the invited sport, let's say. And I think that's why they are spreading the medals after that. and we are expecting that climbing will make it to the Paralympics in Los Angeles, which will be happening after Paris.
In the same year?
4 years after.
Which year are we talking about?
So Tokyo was 2020.
2020, yeah.
So Paris will be 24 and Los Angeles 28.
I see.
So that's our best case scenario, for instance, for Tanya to have expectations of being in the Paralympics.
So in 4 or no, in 3?
In 8.
In 3 years?
Well,
or
actually 7 now.
Yeah, in 3 or in 7 years?
No, 3 it won't be. It's already closed. So
already closed.
Yeah. So in Paris it will be only climbing, and we're hoping that on Los Angeles will be climbing and paraclimbing.
Oh, I see.
But they're still working on it.
But there still needs a community to actually press forward and make sure that climbing is appealing enough for it to feature in the next Olympics.
Yeah, I'm figuring out that also that they will see how it goes on Paris, and then they will work.
That just reinforces the need for experimentation and coming with a good organization format to make it appealing and refreshing to watch and desirable to watch.
Yeah.
Also,
we're already talking about Olympics, like the third session of third games of Olympics with climbing, and we didn't have one yet. So
yeah. it's good to look into the future.
I mean,
plans and dreams.
I think it's just too much speculation still to have like a clear picture of what this is going to be.
Going into innovation in another way, we've been talking about innovation, about the format, the organizational side, and I wanted to talk a bit about innovation into the holds themselves, because now we are witnessing some new ways of creating the holds. 2 examples are the mobile holds. Somehow the holds move. I've never seen them, but I've had some people mention.
Yeah, officially they are not allowed, so you won't see it on official competitions.
All right.
But you can make it for the fun of it.
What do they consist of? Because I've never seen them, so I'm not really sure how do I even imagine them.
Well, it's I think an easy example for you, it can be a doorknob. So a doorknob, a handle, if you do pressure in some way, it moves. If you use it in other way, it doesn't move.
So as a routesetter, you can better enforce the pattern that you want to see.
Yeah, and it's another layer, it's another element to the puzzle. I mean, this maybe when you get to this hold, you need to move it to the correct position to go forward, for example, or it just makes you more unstable because as you're trying to prepare the next move, your hand is moving. So I see lots of benefits for just practice, just for training, because you need to be prepared for stuff going on that you are not expecting, and having these situations will help you react at those situations. But as a competition, I think they will never be part of it. The discussion was already made, they've been excluded, and I don't see also the industry, at least for now, going in that direction.
Could it be because it is too uncertain, so it does not create that much predictability? Or?
Yeah, maybe. I think it's also, I mean, if they move, there is a bigger random factor than if they are stable. Even for the route setting, even for the athletes, and also you're just pushing the sports out of the routes even further. I mean, there is already a lot of people that are disappointing with all these coordination moves and dynamic moves that in the industry they even say like parkour moves, which I disagree, but there is already this debate and this discussion inside, and when you're even pushing it forward, I think that you will find even more traction against, let's say.
Some conservatism.
Yeah. Well, it's also, I mean, for me, for the personal side, it doesn't, I mean, we do some jokes, some fun, but that's not something that I would like to really take serious, or like the direction I would like to. If you are a commercial gym, I can see lots of stuff being fun and playing around with it, and mixing elements like with parkour. There's outside on the other countries, it's really common to have climbing gyms with parkour gyms and some elements in between. So I see that part, but when you go to the disciplines itself, to the sport, also I think if you want to see your sport be taken seriously, you cannot be changing the rules and the elements all the time. Otherwise you will never have a public that really understands what's going on. So you need to try to be clear. When people see a cup today and they see next year, they still understand what's going on, instead of just, okay, that's totally new. Why are they playing tennis with a basketball now? And there is a pool behind the tennis court. You can create a lot of elements, but is there really a point?
Yeah, that's a good point. That there needs to be over time some basic ground to unify the sport and to create a reference for the viewers and for the competitors as well. What about this new kind of hold where you have a wall that moves, and then the holds are just set in stone and they have lights, and you can illuminate different routes with the same holds, and just with the same wall create diverse routes? Is this something that you feel that has a future, or that has an opportunity for training or for competition?
That's the training tool. That's a great training tool, but as a competition, it will never happen like that. I think I don't even see how it will be implemented. Being the light on the holes, it's just some fancy gadget. Let's say it doesn't add any element. It just makes it more user friendly. Let's say this kind of walls has been in use for at least 2 decades now. People just fill it with the holds. They do the same that you do on a chessboard with kind of coordinates, and then I'm climbing and I can give you the coordinate like in a chess game, and let's say, okay, I did this, and this, and you can do the same. You could try to do the same.
Okay, so it's the same but without the light component to it. You just have to manage all the information in your head and somehow visualize.
Normally, even if you have the light, you also have the coordinates. You can see like the numbers and the letters. So even if it's off or whatever, you can use. And of course, then the stiff you put the wall, the harder it gets. But for training, it's great. I mean, especially if you have very few space, it's a great way of managing it and having a tool that it can go to everybody. And the other plus side is that as these kind of walls are progressing, they are getting more and more standard. So if you climb on it here, let's say on Porto, you can expect that tomorrow when you are in Finland and you have the same, you will have exactly the same experience.
Great. So it's a benchmark also.
Yeah. So you can keep your work from the previous session even if you are on the other side of the world, doesn't matter, because it's a standard tool. So you just go there, okay, I have these degrees and these were the problem I was working it, and you keep your session. So there is this plus. But on the other side, you miss out on other stuff. So like if you are in another gym, different walls, different route setting, different whole. So
right. So
it's a tool. It's a tool.
The problem with standardization. There's the good thing because, as you mentioned, you maintain the same pattern or the same standard of quality, but at the same time you lose some space for individual creativity.
Yeah, I mean, it's great for the guys that sell these walls.
For sure,
their job is done, and then you just like keep selling.
And in this case, let's say I train here and then I go abroad and I want to replicate my training. The wall is an inclination. I don't think they will be changing the inclination for every person that wants to try. So there probably have to be a commitment. Let's say
No,
we are
no,
five
no,
guys
no.
climbing.
Actually, that's should be kind of an individual tool. I mean, you can use it with your partner, but it should be an individual tool. So when you are using it, nobody else is using it unless they are doing the same session than you are. And normally they have a mechanical regulation on the side. So you just set the problem that you'll be doing and you set the angle for that problem. So
But if I'm climbing, and then after me, there's another person climbing that is on a entirely different level, they're not gonna adjust the steepness
yeah, they will.
between each person.
Like I said, if you're doing a session, then if you're doing a 1 hour session there, then you're using it. It's yours.
Oh, so it's not
Either they are climbing with you and they are trying the same stuff or at least the same stiffness, or yeah, then you don't move it. But that's not the point. The point is that, I mean, we can agree on, for sure, even if we have different levels, we can agree on some inclination of the wall, and then we can both work on that inclination even if we're doing different holds. So it's also not impossible to manage.
I see. I just found it interesting.
Yeah.
And again, coming to the innovation idea, we see innovation everywhere, even in the holes themselves. So probably in the future, some other method of using the holes in a different way will appear that just adds to these training tools that athletes have more and more.
About that, to be honest, I think it's a great tool, but I think it's a little bit hyped right now because it's like this really good looking gadget, and so it's appealing, it's new, it's sexy in a way, so people want to try it. But I don't think that climbing for the vast majority of the users will be even connected with that. That's what I feel. At least I want to, because otherwise then route setting also, it's kind of pointless at some point, because you just have a computer doing different combinations and the walls are there. You have somebody charging the entrance and it's it.
Yeah,
it's like that's totally the opposite of what I would like climbing gyms to be. For instance, we had a lot of chances of working with climbing apps where you save your routes, you save your score, you give score to the route setting, but although these all sound like really good ideas, I always felt that it will lead people to be more time on the screen and less time on the gym, and I like that when we are on the gym, I don't see phones, I don't see screens. They are on the backpacks there and people are there, they are mingling, they are climbing, they are discussing their own stuff. When you start putting too much layers of new technology onto something that at least it has its roots on the nature and, like being disconnected of all the rest, because then all the other problems come. You are in your phone, then you see, I have an email that I need to... You're already losing the mood and the mindset to be there. I know there is a lot of money going in on the industry to like develop apps, augmented reality, all this stuff, but maybe a share of the community will go that way. I think it's quite probable, but I think the majority, it will stay on a more traditional way of doing stuff.
I could not agree more with what you said, with the fact that people tend to spend more time on the screen if they adopt this kind of methodology. I felt exactly the same thing when I first came across this idea of the movable wall with the lights. It was in a video in YouTube. I think it was Magnus' channel, Magnus Mittebo.
Yeah.
And usually his videos are he with his friends or relatives just climbing the walls and talking and laughing. And this video came to my mind exactly because of that idea, where this guy was showing him how to climb and they were just both looking at the screen all the time and then adjusting the lights and explaining the mechanic. And I felt that like these guys are looking at the screen all this time. It draws the magic away and the experience and the fact that we do sports in a way to go away from the digital life that we already live during the day. It
think
felt a bit sad.
human nature trying to enhance reality, somehow all the time, but at the same time, I think more and more and more people are valuing every day, like disconnecting and just like appreciating the basic stuff, like the simple stuff. So
I feel it's more of a wave in that sense that we started with no digital technology, and then we created all this digital technology, all the media, which was the apex. Or actually, I want to believe it was the apex during the last decade with Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, where everyone just tries to maximize their time on the screen. And I hope that this next decade of 2020, we see it going back, where people realize, as you said, this was too much. We need to cut down on some stuff and go back to the basics.
Also, I think sometimes it happens with the technologies that you have this potential, so you want to enforce this potential, like for instance with VR, let's say. So virtual reality, it's been here for many years already. I mean, they've done 3D movies for, I don't know, 20, even more, I think. But it never really clicked and became the standard, because it's not really needed. It's just something fancy that you do from time to time. But I don't see it the same way. I don't see it like it will be a standard, at least in the near future, because you have the technology, but the potential doesn't bring enough benefits to support the costs, and also the value of the experience doesn't go with the complexity of having to use glasses, or I'm going to watch a movie in your home and it's going to be VR, but I don't have the glasses to go to you. So it just adds more elements, more complexity, and then it's not that big of an extra, a big of a bonus to just like pay more for the TV, to have the glasses, all the stuff. So yeah, I think this is just an example. Maybe it's not the best one, but there is a lot of technology that sometimes people feel, oh, we have the potential to do this and it will be a major strike, but then it kind of it's not really worth it to...
Well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that sometimes technology just becomes a burden and people just want to apply a technology just for the sake of it, just to say, yeah, I'm cool, I use the latest tech. And then you ask them, do you really need to do that? You could have used a simpler one. And chances are they could have done a simpler one. There is even a saying for this that goes that you give a hammer to a boy and we'll just bash on everything he finds. So meaning that it doesn't really need to bash it, but just because it has a hammer, it will just bash everything, because that's human nature. But I also disagree as someone who has a life goal. So my life goal is to one day be able to play a samurai game in a virtual reality, as if I were actually a samurai, because I love fighting with swords.
Yeah, but I mean, that doesn't contradict what I was saying. I mean, I'm not saying that virtual reality is not a thing, or there is not... I mean, I'm just saying that I don't see it as a standard in every place.
But
where we see screens,
yeah, but
let's say.
I think it will become a standard in the next decades.
Well, I don't. The
same way that we've been progressing from the super shitty screens of mobile phones, and they've gaining color, they've gaining texture, they've gaining dimensions, they're gaining audio.
I don't, because I don't think the need is there for in the vast majority of things. I see it easier to enter the gaming world, for instance, like you said, than the TV world. Or I don't need to watch the news on a 3D dimension. I don't need to see the price or the if my flight is on time or not on the airport on a 3D screen. It will, if you see it, oh, okay, that's cool. But there's no need for all the effort that comes with it. So I don't see that if there's not a big need for the application, then it's kind of pointless. That's what I feel in most cases. But like I said, for instance, the immersion, like you said, on the gaming, yeah, that will make a huge difference. That will make a huge difference. I think for gaming, and also then you're cutting stuff because you can play the samurai and you don't need to put the custom of the samurai. You already see like that. The same for your enemies, or so you can just have like a blank green wall on a big, and inside that place you can do and be whatever you want and who you want. So that will really cut a lot of costs and make it simple to just like emulate different environments. But I don't see it as a standard like on every screen, let's say.
That's fair, but if there is a lesson that history has taught us is that we don't know anything that's going to happen.
Oh yeah, so much.
Let's say we are in the 80s and you say, do you actually need to have a computational tool or a calculator, or need to have my flight tickets in my pocket? I'll just print and go there to the boarding, and why do I need everything in my pocket? That's never going to happen.
Pocket, but
in the mobile phone. And now,
yeah, I said, it's one less thing in your pocket. It's one less thing that you can forget.
So what if you do the same reasoning and we go into the future, and then people say, okay, if I can have some augmented reality in my eye, in my retina, or if I can have some glasses that work as a virtual reality, why do I need my phone in my pocket? Then you will be cutting the phone.
No, I mean, about the phone and the support is that, like I said, virtual reality was just an example of people trying to enforce technology where I think there is not a big need. For instance, I know that they are working on medics and doctors being able to do surgery remotely. And for example, on this case, virtual reality probably will be a huge step forward for them because the immersion will be totally different.
Also for the training of the aspect, like they train as if it were a real context and you can really tell the difference between a real body.
For training in most cases, especially for extreme stuff, like if you want to train people for, like they did on the airplanes in the 80s, but with a bigger immersion, I see the technology there like having a big part of the equation, but again, not inside a climbing gym or going to the park. Or I think technology is place also, and sometimes you try to put it everywhere, let's say.
So in terms of climbing specifically, do you feel that climbing will remain a technology-less sport? In terms of the hardcore approach, in terms of you are a person, you go to a wall is physical, you climb on holes, the holes are physical, and you have that physical experience without needing actual layers of technology on it.
Well, I'll put it like this. I'm like you said, I cannot predict the future, and it's kind of pointless to try. But as we keep adding technology layers to the sport, we'll be going far and far away from the route, which was climbing outside on the rock. And then we already have this, and I'm totally comfortable with people that just climb indoors, never outdoors. I totally understand it. I would say I even endorse it if it's your thing. But the same reason we try to promote people going to the rock is that they understand where the sport comes from, like where is the route and why we are doing this and how it starts. And as you keep adding layers and layers and layers of technology, it will be more of a video game in the future and less of a sport. It's, and maybe it will be all of these. I mean, it doesn't need to be inside a box. Maybe there will be all these layers, and then people decide where they want to be in between. For sure, I know that if there was a virtual climbing gym, I will try it at least once, because for the experience.
Meaning, if you were sitting in your sofa, you put a
I don't know,
headset.
maybe,
and try.
yeah, we don't know, or maybe even inside a pool with some mask and just try. I have no idea.
It will be cool if you're underwater and climbing underwater.
I mean, you have more pressure, more. I have no
that
idea.
would be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. That would be cool. But I think the future is exciting, at least in virtual reality or augmented reality. I really, really look forward to being alive in 3 or 4 decades from now, just to see what humanity comes up with. And I hope I have enough health to
enjoy it.
Yeah, to enjoy it. Because I said, like, I will die happy if I can just play as a samurai and just play with swords. That's something I've always wanted to do as a kid. But you always need the other person. You need a sword. And if you could just put a headset on and just live in that world, it would be awesome.
But we're talking about technology growing, and just before we change the subject, we're also still trying to find out what is our technology threshold, what is our limit, and how much technology are we able to cope with in our life, because we are the generation that just like exploded with technology, with screens. We always have a screen. We're always working on the screen. Like everybody nowadays. That's totally different for like 40 years ago or so. So I think we're still trying to understand what are the good things and the bad things that will come with it, and both on health and also mental health and socially. So I think that's one of the things as a society that we'll need to learn what is our threshold and how far should we push technology and how much should we integrate and when and how often, lots of questions around that. So
for sure.
And again, I have the feeling that if we get to the point that society understands that there's just too much technology all the time, these moments of sport, of leisure, it will be the moments where you want the less technology as possible and as standard as possible at that time, as we are today. But because for sure, for us now it's much technology. Maybe in 30 years that's zero technology, because everything else it's super tech. So yeah, it's very complex.
Yeah, I feel that technology will always be there and will be more and more immersive and invasive. Invasive in the sense that it also comes inside our bodies. But I hope that we as a society just learn to use the technology. I mentioned earlier, the decade of the 2010s, it has been a disgrace in terms of mental health, in terms of how people doze and act online. We don't really know how to do that. And I hope that from the future.
You said we are in the hammer stage, so we just got to hammer and we're hammering everything. So that again goes over on my point. So now we need to understand when to use the hammer.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not saying the hammer is not a great tool, but we don't want to use the hammer all the time. So
I will see. Just to wrap it up, because we're already extending a bit.
Yep.
I wanted to summarize what we have been talking about and ask you this. What is the best thing about climbing for you? What fascinates you the most? What attracted you to this sport, to this modality, and what keeps you engaged in it?
That my mind is always engaged more than my body. When I was doing other sports and I always did sport, it was the other way around. The body was engaged, sometimes totally, and then the mind, depending on the issue, was not, or just a bit, or just enough. And for me, being creative, I also need to be challenged all the time. So that's what I like about climbing. I'm always challenged. It doesn't matter. Like again, what we said, it doesn't need to be really hard, but it can be really fun and interesting, even if it's easy. And that's what I try now to promote as a routesetter, because that's what I enjoy as a climber, as a user, is that playing, just this gaming side. And also, it's a sport where you really understand your progression. It's really easy to feel when you are progressing and what you are progressing in. And another thing that I like, because I'm not a very competitive person on the way that I don't want to be better than anyone else per se, but I want to be as much better as I can. So, and that's what I like about climbing. It's totally individual. That's why when people are on the gym, even if they are trying the same boulder, they tend to mingle. They tend to cooperate in the same solution, because they're not really competing to each other. Because you know that if you're not doing it, it's because you're missing it. It's your fault, not because somebody else is better than you. And when you've done it, you know that you've done it because now you are better than you were before, and not because maybe the other guy is tired or, so of course we've been talking a lot about competition and climbing, and it's an aspect and it's a side of it, but in the core of the sport, I think you're challenging yourself both mentally and physically, and that's what I like most about climbing.
So it's like you're fighting the version of the past of yourself, and you're trying to become
exactly.
better than you were yesterday.
There was in a video game, I think Gran Turismo, I'm not sure, where in order to practice, they put the ghost of your fastest lap. So climbing is this: you always have the ghost of your fastest lap there, and you're trying to overcome it. And when you do, you know that you've done better. But now you have a better ghost, and it never ends.
Self-feeding mechanism.
Exactly.
It goes and goes.
So it's the same in climbing. That's why what we were discussing, what was a great boulder 2 years ago now can feel really boring or annoying or whatever, because you're already on another level. You're giving value to other stuff, and so
I think that you just come up with a great idea for virtual reality in climbing. You just create the ghost of yourself climbing.
Well,
and you're climbing,
you can't, you'll be able to do it on speed climbing, but you won't be able to do it on boulder climbing. At least, not 100%, because the point is that the point of climbing and boulder is that you're always challenging yourself with new stuff. So there's no mirror for that. There's no ghost for that. That's the point. It's like this philosophy of I read once about being a father, that you need to teach your son how to deal with the world that you don't know. So you cannot teach when you're teaching your son, you cannot teach them by the standards of today. You need to prepare them for the stuff that you have no idea what it will be. And climbing, it's the same. You need to prepare an athlete for tomorrow finding a tire in the wall and still being able to cope with it, or whatever new element, new problem, new movies. And for that, your yesterday, it won't help you. It's just like try to be as diverse, as experimental as possible, creative as possible, and try to create new situations where you're always trying to surprise So having the mirror image kind of removes the surprise of the equation, let's say.
That's a beautiful idea, that you as a father, you just prepare your children not for the world that you lived in, but for the world that they might encounter in the future.
Yeah, which you have no idea where it is, and then it's way more complex, but that's what you need to do. It's same as a coach. It will be impossible for our parents to prepare us for the internet, for all the digital problems, because they didn't have that concept even. My first computer, I was 5 or 6, and it was very rare at the time. I think it just came like common to everybody have a computer at home when I was around like 13, 14 years old. So yeah, our parents weren't prepared for that. And then after the computers, we're still talking computers without internet. Then after the computers, then came the internet, and the internet was still something like really slow. It's just for a few bursts. Now we are always connected all the time. The kids are always connected all the time. Everybody shares everything, like pictures, meals. So it's a total different perspective.
Yeah, but the values are probably what remains, what stays
Exactly,
constant.
and
Like,
that's
be
what.
kind, be honest. Doesn't matter which technology context you're in. Just be kind. Don't trash talk other people. Listen them out,
So
and do
that's
good.
it. So you need to teach the values and not the context.
Exactly. Just to, as a final question, to wrap it up, um, I apologize for the more philosophical question that I'm gonna ask, but I usually try to understand what motivates people and what is the meaning that they give to their lives. I'm not gonna ask you directly, I'm gonna ask you this in a different way. But in your personal case, what do you believe that is the reason that makes you get up in the morning and enjoy a day? Amongst all the different things you do, what is the unifying value for your
Okay.
life?
The Japanese have a word for it. It's called ikigai. You know,
What does it mean? I don't know.
ikigai. It's the reason that makes you wake up in the morning and go. So of course, now with being a father, there's a total different layer on it. But I do where I'm passionate about it. You know, I have this creative beam, let's say, that's always working on one way or another. My wife sometimes even jokes because I kind of disconnect, and she said, "Oh, I can see already the wheels inside you, like working."
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm route setting when I'm driving, or not, and it's not only route setting, but I'm always trying to come up with something, then to create something, and yeah, that's what drives me. And then I found a way of channeling that to something that I like, and that I can sell in a way that I can live out of it. So I'm really, really lucky on that side. I've worked on many stuff for many years, and I know what it is to wake up in the morning and count down the days for the weekend, for example, or the hours to get out of work because I'm already exhausted, and I don't have that anymore. Right? I mean, when I go to work, I don't go to work.
You find a work that is so enjoyable that it's not work anymore.
Yeah, it's not work anymore. I mean, for sure there will be days I mean, I may be tired, or after some time I want to do something else or whatever, but I don't have that inside struggle that I know that most people had, and I had before, that I'm doing it for the money, or I do it because I have to, or whatever. No, when I go to job, sometimes I am even looking forward to start to work, you know, because that's why when I'm being creative, I'm doing it because I like it, not because, oh, well, tomorrow I need to set a problem and I need to. I never said it that way, and I'm also lucky because I'm never afraid of setting, like running out of ideas and stuff. I found a way of managing the pressure around it and being just relaxed. So yeah, what I want to do in my life is just like try to set as longer as possible, keep having fun. And another thing that drives me is that the people that climb with me or that are around me, I like to help them get their goals, to reach their goals. Either it can be competition or just climb better or be better at something. And if I'm around, that's my goal. I like to help them get that goals. So I have this also in this part, so I'm quite happy.
That's wonderful. I think you're quite happy that you found
Yeah, I'm
something.
super happy.
Happy and lucky that you found something where you can just enjoy as a work without feeling like work.
Yeah. I was really lucky all the time because I always managed to work in stuff that I was passionate about. That's why I worked so many years in the music business. But here now I have control of the process, of all the processes on my own. And that totally changes a lot of stuff. Brings more pressure and more responsibility on one side, but also, you know, you can do stuff your way, and that way it's, at least for me, it's easier to manage.
That's one of the aspects that I hope that society changes into, that we stop viewing work more as an enforcement, but that society becomes organized in a way that it allows for people to explore what actually drives them and makes them happy without making work feel like work. All right. Thank you very much for coming. This was amazing.
Thank you.
And let's see you another time.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye. If you like this podcast, consider liking this episode and subscribing to help supporting me in this journey. Thank you.